We're grateful to have Ido Ziv-Li and Amir Ziv here to tell us about their work and experiences. The stories that you'll hear tonight have particular importance and resonance right now. For while Jewish supremacy ideology began in Hebron, it now resides, unfortunately, in the Israeli parliament. So our two guests, Amir Ziv, grew up in Jerusalem and joined the Hashomer Hatzair youth movement as a kid. During high school, he was a counselor in Hashomer Hatzair and delayed his military service after graduating to do a gap year as an educator in its youth movement. Amir enlisted in the IDF at age 19 and served from 2008 to 2011 in the Nahal Brigade's 50th Battalion as a combatant and a commander. Throughout his time in the military, Amir served at the border fence between the Gaza Strip and Israel, spent 6 months in Hebron, and deployed to different places in the West Bank. Following his service, Amir worked as an educator at a boarding school, and he holds a Bachelor of Education from the Kibbutzim College of Education, Technology, and the Arts. He has been an activist with Breaking the Silence since 2013 and began the role of Pedagogy Coordinator in 2020. Ido Ziv-Li grew up in Nahariya in the north of Israel, and after high school, Ido delayed his military service to study for a year at the Rabin Pre-Army Institute for Israeli Leadership. Ido enlisted in the IDF at age 19 and joined COGAT, which stands for Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, and during his service was deployed as a representative of the army at the Allenby Bridge, took part in control over Palestinians and international visitors' ability to go between the Palestinian Authority and Jordan. Following his service, Ido gave a testimony to Breaking the Silence about his time in the army. Ido worked as a social media manager for Peace Now and took part in the efforts to educate Israeli viewers about the occupation. Today, Ido is here in Toronto studying psychology and political science at University of Toronto. So we're going to jump right into it. And my first question is for both of you, and maybe we can start with you, Ido. What brought you to this work? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to this work, and what is the work that you do?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So my work now is I took like a break from my social media work at Peace Now. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I took a break from my work at the social media of Peace Now, and I'm now in U of T studying full time. And I chose to do that especially to hear a different perspective from what you hear in Israel. And the reason I chose to do that is because of my military service. During my military service, I didn't serve in combat or in the field, but I served under the administrative side of the occupation. So my perspective of the situation was vastly different than I feel not only Israelis or Israelis who served in the army, but almost anyone in Israel, since this unit shows a different perspective and the very of the full extent of the control we have over Palestinians. So for me, the reason to give my testimony and then go on to take part in peace activities in Israel was the understanding that this situation is not one that I want to keep going and one that I can't support or let happen under a country that I am not only a citizen of, but I love. So.
And tell us a little bit about your social media work that you were doing before.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a social media manager at Peace Now, my job was to help Israelis understand better, and especially younger ones, young adults, understand the occupation. Although a lot of Israelis serve in the army, it doesn't really click how much this situation is problematic and is a control of civilians. It's not just protecting, it's also executing control over civilian population. So my work was to try to mediate this understanding of how it is felt from the other side, and especially I worked during the time where annexation of the Palestinian territories was of the West Bank was like in the headlines. It was something that was just about to happen. In the end, it didn't happen, fortunately, but it almost happened, and people didn't really understand what it meant, and why would like Palestinians even have problems with that, or why should we care about them? So my work was to try to help Israelis understand.
And Amir, how about you? What's your work and what drives you?
All right. First of all, hi. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for having us here. I will say I'm a bit nervous to talk with so many people. That's a first for me. And you'll have to excuse my Hebrew accent. So if I'm not clear all the way, just tell me. Esther kind of explained where I grew up and what were the youth movement I was a part of, which I guess some of you know. I grew up in Jerusalem during the Second Intifada, and only when I was an adult and met people who grew up abroad, I came to realize how intense growing up in the Second Intifada in Jerusalem was. And I grew up in a very left-wing oriented environment in Jerusalem, and I came to my big part of my education was that I knew that in order to be what we call in Hebrew Ezrach Mo'il, like a useful member of society, I have to think not only about myself, but I have to think about my surroundings, my society, my community, and I have to be responsible for them. So that's why I did my gap year, and that's why when I joined the IDF, I decided to go and be a commander, because I wanted to do as much as I can in order to help my community. And I grew up knowing that I'm opposing the occupation and I'm opposing the settlement project, but I have never fully understand what neither of those things mean. I didn't have a lot of content within those words, but I did know that was the narrative in which I grew up in, that the reason that the reality is what it is that there's no partner on the Palestinian side, right? We're doing whatever we can to reach peace. And as long as the Palestinians will continue to kill us, we will have to uphold the situation for what it is. And that was my narrative going into the IDF, serving in Hebron and in other places in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And throughout my service, I had a lot of like glitches, I call them, like little moments in which the reality I took part in did not add up with the narrative in which I grew on. But I decided I won't think about it, I won't talk about it. And when I finished my IDF service in 2011, I decided not to talk about my service anymore, and just continue on with my life. And about 2 years after that, in 2013, I was called for reserve duty in a settlement called Bet Chagai, just outside of Hebron. And in that month, most of what I did was to disperse riots, lefazer afsadim in Hebrew. And a riot is basically every Palestinian demonstration, since it is illegal for Palestinians to demonstrate since August of 1968 in the West Bank. And that experience was basically 3 times a week or 4 times a week for a month. I would go into a Palestinian town called Bani Naim, and I would disperse a riot, which means I shot tear gas and stun grenades into a group of Palestinian teenagers who threw rocks at settlers at the entrance of Bani Naim. And I did that for about a month. And when I finished my reserve duties, I went back to the boarding school I worked in at that time, and was half an hour away, but the encounter with my kids in my boarding school was too much for me to handle, because they were basically my whole world. I did anything for them. My relationship with them was the best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. But half an hour away, there was another group of teenagers who were my entire relationship with was shooting tear gas and stun grenades, and they're throwing stones at me. And I realized I have to study and to learn about the reality, because I knew something was missing. So I called up a friend, Nadav, who is shown in the movie, who worked at Breaking the Silence, and asked him to give me a tour to Hebron. And the second the tour ended, I decided to join the organization to give my testimony. And that's basically what I'm doing ever since. And I think if I want to sum it up quickly about us, we came to realize there's a huge gap between what IDF soldiers, as like myself, are sent to do on a daily basis in the occupied territories, and what the Israeli society knows about it, for real knows about it. And we took it upon ourselves to do two main things. First one is to collect testimonies of IDF veterans who served in the occupied territories. We today have over 1,300 testifiers who are members of the organization, male and female soldiers from different units, different areas of service, and different time period of service between the year 2000 and today. And the second thing we do is we take those testimonies and we use them as the base of our educational work, which is most of what we do. Events like this one, we're conducting tours to Hebron and to the South Hebron Hills, panels, lectures, whatever it takes, to reach as many people as we can to talk about the occupation for what it is, for one specific reason, which is very easy to say, but a bit more complicated to do, which is to end Israeli occupation. I'll stop now.
So I think we all had a very visceral reaction to that film, but of course for both of you, it would be even more so. And I wonder if you could talk about your reactions when you see it and how it connects to your own experience in the occupied territories. And we did mention that you worked for the civil administration. It's a slightly different kind of, method of control. And I recommend anybody more interested to read, I think it's a pretty new publication called Military Occupation, that Breaking Military Rules, which was recently released, which is filled with testimony of people who had experience like Ido's, but he's going to tell us about his and how he feels seeing this film.
Yes, absolutely. First, you might feel like everyone, especially Israelis, but everyone around the world would have a reaction to that. Like everyone can understand that what's happening there is wrong, and you feel it in your bones, like that there is something that's not right with this situation. This part of the occupation is the one that's very easy also to understand why it's wrong. And so it's really good in a movie. My side, the side I've been on was also like in contact with Palestinians, but also a lot of it was done in an office. And although it's done in an office, the control over Palestinians that it executes is just as strong as the control that is done in the field. So it's a very interesting feeling for me to see this side, because I can connect emotionally to what they did, but in a different way. One situation, for example, I had was when I was in Allenby Bridge, which is the border between the Palestinian Authority and Jordan, and the army and the Israelis the Israeli officers are there to control the movement and to just decide pretty much who goes in and out. And one situation I've been in was that there was someone who came from abroad. She spoke English. She was, I think, American. And she came there. She said, like, her family is Palestinian. And she is in, like, the West Bank, and she wants to visit them. But we got a call saying she can't come in because she's from Gaza. And we were in our ninth office and we didn't really want to go, so we went there and like said we'll deal with it fast, like just let her know that she can't come in, or if she can come in she can just go to Gaza, because people who were born in Gaza can't go to the West Bank and vice versa. And we, as we control that they can't communicate with each other. They can communicate, but they can go freely between the two places. And when we came there, apparently she was taken out of Gaza as a baby. And she was like, she didn't grow up in Gaza. She didn't live there. But we decided that she can't visit her family in the West Bank because she was born in Gaza, so she can't see her family. And we just like told her, you can either go back where you came from or go to Gaza, and you can't really go out.
So while that was going on, while you were in the moment, I mean, you gained perspective, what goes through your mind in the moment? Do you have a feeling even as you're doing it that this is not right, or you just think, obviously you've been socialized and trained to do a job to protect your country? Is there a little voice there, or is that after the fact that it kind of hits you?
I think it depends. Most of the time, you're just doing a job. For most people, I feel like it's like that with anything you do on your, even like your job, like you don't really think about the why, you just do it. And especially in Kogat, you're working in an office, so it's like very much feels like a 9-to-5 job that you do and then go back to the base or like your home, and which is like functioned as a home, and like just do it. But there are like those situations, and I think it was all said in the movie, like when you need to speak in your American accent, when you need to speak to a person who has questions, or you need to do something that is you feel like is extremely, like you feel it in your bones. In those situations, you do like start to think about it. And I think those situations also like pushed me to give the testimony at the end.
How about you, Amir?
I'll say that, first of all, the movie, it is very personal for me because I served in Hebron for about 6 months. And obviously I know all of the people who are in the movie. And it strikes a specific place. I told you that throughout my service, I had a lot of glitches, right? Events that got me thinking, but then I pushed them down. Those glitches is basically everything you saw in the movie, right? Patrols I did in Hebron, checkposts, arrests, home invasions of Palestinians, the relationship I had with the Israeli settlers in Hebron, all of those little moments, a lot of different events I had throughout my service that got me thinking, but the minute I started thinking, I pushed it down because I could not handle it at that time. And I think in a lot of ways, what brings all of my experiences and everything else you saw in the movie together is based on the security approach that we hold on or in the occupied territories. As soldiers and Israelis as a whole, I mean, it began in the IDF, but it's very wide now in Israel. We see all of the Palestinians as members in 1 in 2 groups, right? If you're a Palestinian in the occupied territories, you can be a member of 1 in 2 groups, מעורבים, בלתי מעורבים, like involved Palestinians and uninvolved Palestinians. And involved Palestinians are Palestinians who are involved in terror and I know that either because I have a very specific information about what they're doing, or they're throwing stones at me, or shooting at me, or maybe holding up a Palestinian flag in a demonstration, which again is illegal in the West Bank. And they are an imminent threat, and I know what to do with them. The rest of the Palestinians are uninvolved, which means they're not an imminent threat, but as one of the testifiers says in the movie, everybody is a potential terrorist, right? Everybody can be a threat in any given moment. Right? Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip cannot be innocent. That's not an option for Palestinians. They are all some level of security threat, either an imminent threat or a potential threat. And because they are all threats, they are all legitimate targets for my actions as a soldier. That's why I can invade any Palestinian home I want. This is why I can arrest every Palestinian for basically everything. And me as a commander, as a squad commander, had the ability to choose which Palestinian homes we would invade in a certain patrol. And that's the basic approach we have in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And the situation today in the West Bank is that we have 2.7 million Palestinians, about 2.7. We don't have 3 million Israeli soldiers in the West Bank, right? Hebron is a good example within the West Bank. Hebron is the second biggest Palestinian city in the West Bank. About 230,000 Palestinians live in Hebron. We have also 800 Israeli settlers who live in Hebron. And in order to keep those 800 settlers safe, we have 650 Israeli soldiers who are deployed in any given moment in the city. That's what I did in 2010. And how do you control a situation in which everybody is a threat? All 230,000 Palestinians are a threat, and you have 650 men and women to maintain order, right? You cannot be in every street corner. You can't be in every junction to see every Palestinian, whether he's doing something that he's not supposed to do, right? You cannot use physical force alone in that situation. That's why we use everything in the back of everything you saw in the movie is a method or a notion in which we call in the IDF הפגנת נוכחות, like making our presence felt, creating an uncertainty amongst the Palestinian lives in order for them to feel as if it is possible that soldiers will be everywhere in every given moment. And that uncertainty aims for all of the Palestinian population so they would keep their heads down. They won't resist. They would feel as if resistance is irrelevant. And again, in order to do that, you need to do everything you saw in the movie, everything I did 12 years ago. And 13 years ago in the Gaza Strip and in other places in the West Bank. So in a lot of ways, the only reason I think I'm not in the movie is because it was made before I joined as an employee to Breaking the Silence. I mean, just as easily this could have been me or any other of the thousands of soldiers who served Hebron.
It must be hard to live with that kind of cognitive dissonance, right? That on the one hand you think everybody's a potential danger, and on the other you're beating up on 10-year-olds. It's your basic goodness must recoil to a certain extent.
It is difficult, and I think that's why my personal experience was I tried not to think about it. As Ido says, I mean, you do things because it's your job now. And I will say that when I served in Hebron, I did feel I'm in a dangerous place, right? Palestinians threw rocks at me. Palestinians would throw Molotov cocktails. There was demonstration. There was a lot of violence, both from Palestinians, from settlers. I inflicted a lot of violence in Hebron. So there is a sense of danger, obviously. And also, yeah, it is very hard to be fully aware. For me, it was very hard to be fully aware to what I'm doing and keep on doing it. In a lot of senses, that's why I tried not to think about it as a soldier. That's why I decided when I left the IDF not to talk about it ever again. And it took me 2 more years after my service to decide I need to stop repressing it. And I have to deal with it.
Because clearly it had an impact. So I guess one of the things Breaking the Silence wants to do, besides getting the testimony, is to make young soldiers available, aware of what they're going to be facing. And I'm sure, as most of you know, the New Israel Fund of Canada specifically funds efforts to educate young Israelis about the occupation. So Amir, can you talk about Breaking the Silence's education and outreach strategy? And I'm particularly interested in what you do to engage those people who might not want to hear from you or not really receptive to your message, because it's great we're all here and showing support, but I'm wagering that there's a degree of agreement. How do we have the conversation, and how do you reach out to people that don't?
First of all, I'll say that we're trying to reach as many people as possible, and we do try to reach a lot of teenagers before they join the IDF. But when we're reaching teenagers, we're not doing it as future soldiers, right? I'm not addressing them as future soldiers, because ending the occupation isn't, the responsibility for ending the occupation doesn't lie on the shoulders of the Israeli soldiers, right? Because the decision to occupy the West Bank and the Gaza Strip isn't a decision made by the IDF, right? The IDF is a tool, in a way, that the state uses to uphold the policy that the state of Israel, the governments for the past 55 years decided on, right? It's not up to me as a soldier to end the occupation. As long as we'll send Israeli soldiers with the mission, uphold a military regime over almost 5 million civilians, residents, this is how it would look like, right? It's not up to the single soldier to do it differently. You cannot fix the occupation from within, and you can only end it. And ending it is a political discussion. The only reason, or not the only reason, the reason we use our experiences as soldiers is in order to bring the reality of the occupation as it is. But it's not up to soldiers to fix it. It's up to the Israeli society and the international community in a political level. So even when I'm addressing Israeli teenagers, I'm doing it as either future or present citizens of Israel. They need to elect their leaders. They need to join political parties. They need to do political activism. And they need to figure out how they feel about this reality. And if they think this should not happen, they have to do something about it as citizens, as activists, as people who are engaged politically in Israel. And I think an extra step into engaging young crowds in Israel, I think if we believe that 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds are old enough, adult enough, and mature enough to uphold a military regime over millions of people, they are old enough, and they are adult enough, and they are mature enough to talk about it. And they can know what are they going to do. That won't change the fact that the actions they will take are immoral. You cannot occupy in a moral way, but you have to know what you're going into. And I think the main engagement with crowds, both people who want to hear us and both people who don't want to hear me or meet me won't do that, right? But I think when I'm approaching the Israeli society and the Jewish communities abroad and the international community, I'm approaching the pro-democratic camp, right? The people who believe that democracy is the right way to rule, to live in. And when we're engaging that camp, what we're trying to do is to bring content, to bring facts, to bring the reality as it is into the already existing conversation, right? The conversation about the Israeli occupation is the existence of the conversation isn't a question whether breaking the silence will or won't talk, right? If we'll cease to exist, the conversation about the Israeli occupation will continue on, right? What we believe is missing in that conversation is the reality, is the occupation itself. Again, I grew up talking about the occupation. I had no idea what it is. And I think when you talk facts, when you talk reality, when you talk what the occupation is, it's a lot more difficult to ignore it or to say, well, it's not my problem, it's not up to me. And yeah.
Do you show this film to Israeli young people?
Yeah.
And can you give us some idea of the kind of reaction? Can you think of any examples? Don't need to put you on the spot.
I will say that this event is the end of my tour in the United States and Canada for the past 2.5 weeks, and I've seen it like 2 times a day for the past 2.5 weeks. So we use it quite a lot. We do use it in Israel as well. I think the reaction is what you've expected to be. I think it's very difficult, mostly for Israelis, to look into the mirror we're trying to hold in front of our own society. It is difficult to see. I mean, it is a difficult notion, or it is a difficult understanding about ourselves as a society. And I think a lot of people are trying to say, well, I wasn't a combat soldier, so it's not on me. But it is important to say that this is being done in all of our behalfs, whether you're an Israeli citizen who served as a combat soldier or who don't, or if you haven't served in the IDF at all, or even if you're a member of the Jewish community in North America who is supporting in that in some sort of way, whether you know it or not, you want it or not. And this is being done in all of our behalf. So this is all of our problems. So it is something a lot of people are trying to disconnect themselves from. And I think it's crucial that we'll continue to do that for people to understand what our role in this reality is.
Sure. And I guess I'm trying to get a fix on who it is you're talking to. Are they shocked? Are they surprised? Are they taken aback? Are they?
Yeah, I mean, most Israelis, not even young Israelis, most Israelis don't know what the reality of the occupation is. It's very easy to be an Israeli without ever being in the West Bank. Most of us don't serve in the West Bank. Most of us don't serve as combat soldiers or in Kogat in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip. And you can live your whole life as an Israeli without ever meeting a Palestinian or going into the West Bank. More than that, it's one of the most basic examples, but in the Israeli educational system, there's a law in which every classroom in Israel has to have the picture of the prime minister, the president, the national anthem, this Declaration of Independence, and a map of Israel in every classroom. And the maps that are on the walls in classroom in Israel are not this map, right? The maps in Israeli classroom don't have the green line and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip on them. And in Jewish schools in Toronto as well, apparently. And the fact is, you can grow as an Israeli without knowing what the West Bank is. So most Israelis are surprised.
So your work's important.
I think so, yeah. That's what I do.
To understate the obvious, yes. So we're going to move on because we want to leave time for some questions. So my last question is, it's been, I think everybody has gone through their own personal whatever, and since the election results, and it's going to be tough slogging. So we'll start with you, Ido. Why do you keep fighting?
Because Israel is important to me, and because I feel like it's an important fight. Although, like, the political situation in Israel now is not a good one, to state the obvious. 50% of the country voted differently. And from my experience with people who voted also to decide who is now the coalition, on the individual basis, they don't agree with the occupation. They also, like, when they see, when I speak about like what I experienced, and then they start to speak about what they experienced in the army, they know it's not right. They just have this problem. Most people have the problem of connecting like the individual side to the like bigger perspective, and that, in my opinion, like something that's Breaking the Silence doing very well, connecting those two sides. And for me, that's why this fight is not only important, but also like has a good chance to succeed, since I think there is like a big coalition of people who agree.
That's terrific. Amir?
I will say that in my own selfish reasons, I have a 1-year-old at home. And I don't want her in 17 years to go and occupy other people. I want her to grow up in a reality in which she doesn't have to fear for her life because of our neighbors, as we call it in Hebrew, right? המדינות השכנות, או השכנים שלנו. And I want her to grow up in a safe, peaceful, equal place. And I don't believe you cannot believe in equality up until a certain line, right? If you either believe in equality or you don't. And if you do, then everybody should be equal. Doesn't mean necessarily that everybody should live in one big happy state worldwide. That's not what I'm saying. But you cannot think equality stops in the green line, right? And I want her to grow up in a very peaceful, equal place. But in a broader sense, I think it's important to keep on the fight because I believe we can change the reality. If I would not believe this is a possibility, I won't do what I do. And I do it because I believe we can. And it's important that people know that, or people who want to join the fight do that. And I believe most Israelis would want to live in a democratic state who pursue peace and equality. And I honestly believe in the kindness of people. So I believe as long as we'll keep on doing our job alongside with other organizations and activists in solidarity with Palestinians, non-activists, and non-violent activists, we can change the reality.
All right. Well,
that's it.
That's a good rallying cry.